Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Retro Wrestling Review Series, Season 8, Episode 7. And now the NXT Review Series are going to start to actually get better and better um, because now we have the NXT starting to become a big brand. Everybody had known about it. And NXT just really starts to take over. NXT was already kind of starting to take over, but it wasn't um, really huge yet. And then NXT Takeover Brooklyn was like NXT's breakout because NXT really broke out here. Um, because and at the time a lot of the NXT superstars were appearing on Raw and SmackDown and NXT, so that helped promote NXT itself. You had Kevin Owens appearing with the NXT Championship. You had him defending the title on Raw and SmackDown. And then you had Sasha Banks, who was appearing. You had Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte, who had been called up, but they were also working NXT shows. And you had Sasha Banks, who was appearing with the NXT Women's Championship. So NXT was starting to become a pretty damn huge deal. You had the NXT champion beat the United States champion on the at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, which was huge. The NXT champion was pretty much working main event matches. So NXT was starting to become really huge. It was talked about all the time. Everybody loved NXT. And NXT was really starting to become huge. And this show is a huge show for NXT because this was going to be NXT's first takeover outside Full Sail University. This was the first time, because throughout this point, they had only been at Full Sail University, and it says here that there would only be like 400 people that would show up to it. So they were going to have like a huge audience at this show because they were filming this in New York in the Barclays Center. So this was a pretty damn huge event for NXT. So what did it succeed? We're going to find out. But now that I've kind of talked about that excitement, let me talk about the matches themselves that are going to be taking place on the show. We have 3 singles matches on this show. We have an NXT Tag Team Championship match, an NXT Women's Championship match, and an NXT Championship match. And I'll go through more thoroughly what the matches are once I get there. And I'm going to structure my review sort of the same way, but instead there's no preview show. There's only the pre-show and the actual show itself. So I'm going to cover the pre-show on the one take, and then when I start talking about the actual show, I'll come on here and talk about it in different takes. So let's get to talking about this show. Okay, so first we had the pre-show, and they went over the matches, which I'm going to say what they are right now. We have a match between Jushin Thunder Liger and Tyler Breeze. We have an NXT Tag Team Championship match, NXT Tag Team Champions Blake and Murphy versus the Vaudevillains. We have a singles match between Apollo Crews and Ty Dillinger. We have another singles match between Samoa Joe and Baron Corbin. We have an NXT Women's Championship match, NXT Women's Champion Sasha Banks versus Bayley. And then we have the main event. It's going to be a ladder match for the NXT Championship, NXT Champion Finn Balor versus Kevin Owens. Now that I've gone through the matches, let me get to the storyline reasons about why these matches are happening. Every match had some type of story for happening, which was nice. So starting with the build-up between Samoa Joe and Baron Corbin. The reason why this match was happening was because Baron Corbin had debuted at NXT TakeOver Fatal 4-Way, and pretty much since then he had run roughshod. He was unstoppable. He was running through everybody in NXT, and at first they were like I've been mentioning these past few episodes, they were trying to go against the grain and trying to make Baron Corbin a babyface. They were forcing him down people's throats as a babyface. And it really wasn't working, so then NXT fixed the problem by turning him heel. And they had him, talk about how he didn't care about what everybody else that has come here accomplished all over the world. He only cared about his accomplishments. He talked about how he was paid to go to college off a mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu background. He was paid to go to the NFL to play football, which he didn't make it to the NFL, but they like to tell you that. And he said that he got here because of a phone call. And, he talked about how he run rough shot through everybody. He was unstoppable. Baron Corbin, when he had finally turned heel, really owned it because the fans started turning on Baron Corbin, and they used that to turn him heel. And eventually, after he was unstoppable, he challenged someone to come out and stop him. Well, meanwhile, Samoa Joe had made his debut at NXT TakeOver Unstoppable, and he wanted to be the one to take on Baron Corbin. He felt like because he was the Samoan submission machine, he could be the one to take him down. He even talked about how he didn't need to make a phone call to get signed to NXT. He was called to get signed to NXT, and he said that he's going to show Baron Corbin why he's more dominant than him. They even had a little brawl where Samoa Joe ended up choking out Baron Corbin with the Corkia clutch. And then eventually Baron Corbin ended up attacking him from behind, laying him out within the day. So these were two unstoppable forces ready to go at it. And this feud actually had some really solid build behind it. So that was cool. It was a must-need win for both guys because Baron Corbin was undefeated in NXT. He really needed to look dominant. But Samoa Joe, this was technically his first match at a TakeOver. He needed to look dominant. And it was interesting to see what was going to happen there. And then afterwards, Actually, I didn't even mention who was on the panel for the pay-per-view. I'm sorry. We had Renee Young, Corey Graves, Lita, and Byron Saxton on the panel. Renee Young has definitely gone far since then. She's gone on to host other NXT specials and mainstream pay-per-views. But now she only does the main roster pay-per-views. And she also is the co-host of Talkin' Smack, and she's also a backstage interviewer. Corey Graves continued to commentate for NXT, but after the brand split, he ended up commentating for Raw. And now he's left NXT. Now he commentates for both Raw and WWE 205 Live. Lita's obviously a legend in the wrestling business. She's been women's champion and she's main evented Raw and stuff. And obviously, she pretty much stayed the same. She would do the panels for Raw, SmackDown, and the pay-per-views until her contract eventually was up. She was a trainer on Tough Enough. And Byron Saxton was commentating already for the main roster and NXT, and then eventually he only did the main roster. Then after the brand split, he was drafted to Raw where he commentated for Raw, but then after the Superstar Shakeup, now he does commentary for SmackDown. So that gets that out of the way. But yeah, Samoa Joe anyhow gets interviewed, and he says that Baron Corbin may talk about how he's an unstoppable force, but he's had a chance to face Samoa Joe man-to-man, but instead he chooses to attack him from behind from the entrance ramp after he's already had a match. And he says that tonight he's going to stop Baron Corbin's dominance. So I like the feud between Samoa Joe and Baron Corbin. Then we have the build-up for the Apollo Crews and Ty Dillinger match. The reason why this match was happening was because Apollo Crews was on the verge of making his debut to NXT. They were hyping up huge video packages for him. And they were really hyping him up. And Ty Dillinger was just someone that they wanted, that he was meant to wrestle. Ty Dillinger started doing his whole 10 thing. At first, he was a heel. He thought he was the perfect 10. So I guess it made sense for them to have a match. Then we have the build-up for the NXT Women's Championship match. Now, this match is probably the best built-up match on the show. It was between Sasha Banks and Bayley. The reason this match was happening was because Sasha Banks and Bayley both came into NXT together around the same time. They were part of the 4 Horsewomen, as well as Charlotte and Becky Lynch. But Bayley was always that nice girl that came in. She had been in NXT for 2 years, and she was always the one that wanted to give everybody hugs, wanted to be everybody's friend. But then we kind of saw something that happened while this was going on. Meanwhile, everybody had kept turning on Bayley. In that 4 Horsewomen, Charlotte turned on Bayley. She became NXT Women's Champion. Becky Lynch turned on Bayley. She got called up to the main roster and was in a huge NXT Women's Championship match in NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. Sasha Banks eventually turned heel. Didn't really turn on Bayley necessarily, but she eventually turned heel, and she became the NXT Women's Champion at NXT TakeOver Rival. Meanwhile, Bayley was the one injured. Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte would go on to be called up to the main roster. And Bayley was always just kind of left out in the dust. She felt like that her career didn't get, she felt like she wasn't that she was there, but she didn't really quite get to the level that she could have. She would always get this close to the NXT Women's Championship, but then she would not quite get there yet. They were telling the underdog storyline with Bayley, and then eventually, she had returned from a hand injury and finally started to gain some wins. She wanted to go after that NXT Women's Championship, so she wanted to get her wins back that she lost. So she beat Charlotte in a match, and then she defeated Becky Lynch to become the number one contender for the NXT Women's Championship. And there was only one superstar left, one woman left for her to beat, and that was Sasha Banks. Sasha Banks, even talked about, and I even like how they told the Cinderella story where it showed Bayley with the entrance and the wacky inflatable tube men, and then it kind of gets all depressed and kind of shows them kind of popping and stuff. So Sasha Banks even would talk about, Bayley even had a huge following. She had her number one fan Izzy with her, and Bayley said that she's going to finally win the NXT Women's Championship. She's going to finally not get into that spot and lose. Sasha Banks was the person that was always putting Bayley down, talk about how Bayley wasn't good enough to be NXT Women's Champion, how she was the one on Raw and SmackDown every week, and Bayley was stuck on NXT, so she was more of a superstar than Bayley was. She says that she's going to show the fans that not all fairy tales have happy endings, and this feud really worked. And then on the contract signing, Bayley finally had snapped and attacked Sasha Banks. And it led us to this match. It even kind of showed to everybody who had become big stars, and Bayley was just kind of disappeared. She was left in the dust. So this was pretty much Bayley's last chance to win that NXT Women's Championship, and this was a huge match. And before, I wasn't really a huge fan of Bayley, but this video package and this match made me a huge fan of Bayley, so I thought that was good. So this match, perfect build-up. It was awesome. Just the continuation of the chase for Bayley to win that NXT Women's Championship. So that was really cool. Then we had the build up to the NXT Tag Team Championship match between Blake and Murphy and the Vaudevillains. Blake and Murphy had won the NXT Tag Team Championships and then an NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. Alexa Bliss aligned herself with Blake and Murphy, and she pretty much helped them at every turn retain the NXT Tag Team Championships. Eventually, the Vaudevillains became the number one contenders to the NXT Tag Team Championships, and they had the match on an episode of NXT where they lost because of interference by Alexa Bliss. So they were upset about it, so they wanted something to be done about it. They are going to get their rematch at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, where the Vaudevillains were going to even up the score, and they were going to have someone go in there and take care of Alexa Bliss, so that way it could just be an even match. And, that was really the storyline. Not a bad storyline, actually. And I liked the Vaudevillains at the time. They had just turned face, because they had been off TV. They had just returned. And, Blake and Murphy were really bland tag team champions. And I did like it when every time the Vaudevillains were kept talking, and Alexa Bliss would slap them right in the face. That was pretty damn awesome. So yeah, not a bad build-up there. And then it shows Neville arrive into the arena. He arrives with Finn Balor and Cesaro, because Cesaro was having a match the next night at SummerSlam, because this show aired during SummerSlam weekend, which made the show even huger. Cesaro was having a match with Kevin Owens the next night. Neville was in the first ever ladder match in NXT, so it made sense for him to be there, and obviously Finn Balor's wrestling on that show, so he obviously has to be there. So then we had the build-up between Jushin Thunder Liger and Tyler Breeze. Tyler Breeze had gotten upset that he didn't really feel like there was enough competition in NXT, so he wanted William Regal to give him, who was the general manager at the time and still is the general manager, to give him more competition. So William Regal accepted his offer, so we gave him Jushin Thunder Liger. And Jushin Thunder Liger was someone that had traveled all over the world in the wrestling business. He had been in WCW, he had been in Ring of Honor, he had been in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and the only place he hadn't hit was WWE, so this was his chance to finally showcase his talents. And Tyler Breeze would constantly make fun of him, talking about how he's an uggo by saying that he's wearing a mask. And he would constantly come out with a mask of Juice and Thunder Liger. It was pretty good build-up. So that led to that match. And then we had the Tyler Breeze's photo shoot, and Rich Brennan tries to interview him, and Tyler Breeze like, don't you see I'm trying to get prepared for the most important match of my life? And in fact, maybe you should put this mask on to cover your uggo face. And he puts the mask on, and it was really funny. Then we had the build-up for the NXT Championship match between Finn Balor and Kevin Owens. The reason why this match was happening was Kevin Owens originally was running roughshod in NXT. He had beaten everybody. He had taken everybody out. He had won the NXT Championship. And then finally Finn Balor at NXT TakeOver Unstoppable became the number one contender to the NXT Championship. And he got his NXT Championship match at Beast in the East, where he ended up finally winning the NXT Championship from Kevin Owens in his home Japan, where he made a name for himself. And the rematch was made for NXT TakeOver Brooklyn between Kevin Owens and Finn Balor. And Kevin Owens really wanted to get that NXT championship back. He felt like that he needed it because he had lost his matches on the main roster. He felt like the NXT championship would help revitalize his career. So he wanted to up the ante. He since Finn Balor beat him at his home turf, he wanted to prove that NXT TakeOver Brooklyn was a fluke. So he wanted to face Finn Balor in a ladder match, which Finn Balor accepted. And he was asked if he could defeat Finn Balor as the Demon, but he didn't really give much of an answer. He just ended up walking away doing the interview. And Kevin Owens even laid out Finn Balor in an episode of NXT with the pump-up powerbomb. And he said that he was going to defeat Finn Balor and become the first ever two-time NXT champion. And he said that he's going to grab the NXT championship off the ladder where Finn Balor's laid there broken and battered. And then Finn Balor attacked him, hit the drop kick, went to lay him out with the ladder, but Owens escaped. And Finn Balor said that he was going to finally shut up Kevin Owens once and for all and kick his ass. And that led to this match here. Overall, that match was really well built up. They hyped it up even on Raw and SmackDown, since Kevin Owens was working Raws and SmackDowns, and it was really damn cool. Because Finn Balor constantly kept getting Kevin Owens' number, and Kevin Owens was the big heel in NXT, and this was a huge rematch that they were doing, so I liked it. And overall, this show, build-up-wise, was pretty damn good. You got a good build-up match between Samoa Joe and Baron Corbin, the NXT Women's title match, the tag title match, the Tyler Breeze, Juice and Thunder Liger, and the NXT Championship match. And it was really cool. And, the fact that this show was, a lot of hype was going behind the show. It was airing during SummerSlam weekend. So it was, this show had a lot going behind it. And let's see if the show delivered. Okay, so the show starts off with a Triple H promo. And he talks about how NXT started as a vision, but the fans made it a revolution. Originally, it wasn't growing, but you guys made it unstoppable. And he said that you guys asked for change, and NXT gave us that change. And then now we're here. And then he puts his hands up, and then the lights come on. And then he says, "We are NXT." And this was a huge moment because, like I said, this was the first time that a TakeOver entered the world. NXT was becoming a huge thing where it was just constantly taking over. And it was awesome. So overall, I thought Triple H's promo was very well done. Originally, he was always a heel on the main roster, but on NXT, he's always a babyface. So, it was a huge moment for Triple H to be out there since NXT is his creation. So I thought this was awesome. All right, so then we had the commentary team of Corey Graves, Rich Brennan, and Byron Saxton. And obviously, Rich Brennan would continue to commentate for NXT and SmackDown until he was eventually released in 2016, which shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. Sucks to be Rich Brennan. And we had our first actual match on the show. It was Tyler Breeze versus Juice and Thunder Liger. Tyler Breeze had another special entrance. Everybody came out. All the women came out dressed like scenes you would see in New York, like the Statue of Liberty, like a taxi scene, other buildings like that. And then he also came out and did his normal thing where he had the selfie stick and he films himself. And he actually said that they actually said that video aired on Facebook Live, so that was pretty interesting. And we had the match itself, though. Really awesome to see Juice and Thunder Liger step into a WWE win for the first time. And Juice and Thunder Liger and Tyler Breeze start chain wrestling each other, and then eventually Juice and Thunder Liger gets Tyler Breeze into an inverted surfboard submission. Surfboard submission. But Tyler Breeze is able to get out of it. He ends up hitting a dropkick on him and putting him into the Camaro special. And then eventually he takes Tyler Breeze's selfie stick and he takes a selfie of himself, which was really funny. And he throws it into his face. He hits a bunch of right hands on him. And eventually Tyler Breeze pulls out his mask and he ends up hitting a supermodel kick on him. He kicks out. Tyler Breeze dominates the matchup with a bunch of headlocks and stuff. And then eventually he hits a double knees to the back, right to the back on him, which looked pretty sick. And Juice and Thunder Liger was able to kick out of it. Eventually, Juice and Thunder Liger starts to make his comeback. He goes to hit a splash off the top, but Tyler Breeze gets his knees up, gets into a roll-up. He kicks out again. And then eventually, he hits a palm strike right to Tyler Breeze's face. He goes for the splash again, but Tyler Breeze moves out of the way, and then he hits the a flip off the top, the running flip off the top rope. I forget the name of the move. And then eventually he hits the run-in Liger bomb for the win. And yeah, it was really I thought this was a good opening matchup here. Really awesome to see Juice and Thunder Liger come up here for the first time. Maybe the only thing I would have suggested is maybe you could have had Tyler Breeze win this match, because Tyler Breeze never really had much of a big win at NXT TakeOver, and he was the one that at least stayed. Juice and Thunder Liger, this was the only match he had, and then he was gone out of the company after this, so maybe it wouldn't have hurt Juice and Thunder Liger if he had lost this match that much. Maybe Tyler Breeze winning, it would have actually made a future star, so that's the only thing I would have suggested. But the aftermath came as afterwards, the Juice and Thunder Liger, this would be a one-night thing where he would wrestle, then eventually he would go back to wrestling on the indie scenes. Tyler Breeze had one more TakeOver match, and then he was called up to the main roster where he was pushed for about a month, and then they completely forgot about him. And then he pretty much was just a jobber for a while, and now he's in a tag team. And at Backlash, he is going to be wrestling. He is wrestling for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, because now he's on SmackDown because of the brand splits. But they definitely haven't utilized Tyler Breeze to his potential, and it's a real shame. But yeah, Juice and Thunder Liger would continue wrestling all over the world. But overall, I thought this match was good, and no one really benefited, but it was definitely just a fun match to watch Juice and Thunder Liger for the old fans. And you could say Tyler Breeze benefited a little bit from it, but really not much. Next, we had a Nia Jax video package, and she talks about how most girls are given everything in life, but she's not most girls, and how she could just destroy someone with just a smile. I just said that she's going to dominate NXT, and she kind of did dominate NXT. She took out everybody, had an NXT Women's Championship match at NXT TakeOver The End in 2016, had an NXT Championship match at NXT TakeOver London, actually, in 2015. So I guess she kind of dominated NXT. And now she's up on the main roster, where she just is absolutely awful. So it's Nia Jax was definitely an acquisition that I wish they never signed. Okay, so we had the next match. It was an NXT Tag Team Championship match. NXT Tag Team Champions Blake and Murphy with Alexa Bliss ringside versus the Vaudevillains. And Alexa Bliss gets on the mic and says that the Vaudevillains weren't able to find anyone to help them, which means that nobody wants to align themselves with you because you're losers and nobody wants to take me on. So she goes to slap them. However, Aiden English stops her, and the Vaudevillains reveal that the person that is going to be helping them is Blue Pants, which kind of made sense because they were wearing blue attire. So I thought that was a pretty cool moment. Obviously, Blue Pants was someone that was brought in by technically Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy to as a practice match for Carmella. and she was someone that got really over. She would always come out with Colin Cassidy's voice. So I thought that was really cool. And, the white person obviously came in to help them. And the match starts off, the Vaudevillains dominate the first half of the matchup. They really get the heat on Blake and Murphy for a while. Blake and Murphy both try to lay out Aiden English, but he takes them both out with quick arm drags, which was pretty cool. And eventually they were able to get the heat on Aiden English when Blake ends up pulling him back first onto the apron, and Blake and Murphy get the hit on Aiden English for a long ass time. They hit a double neck breaker on him. Aiden English kicks out. There was one spot where Aiden English tried to get to Simon Gosh for a tag, but Blake pulled him down before he could get there. And then eventually Aiden English was able to make the tag to Simon Gosh. He ended up taking out everybody. But however, Blake and Murphy were able to cut him off. And then eventually Aiden English made the tag into the win. And Blake tried to hit a superplex onto Aiden English, but Aiden English fought out of it, so Murphy tried to come in and help him. But Simon Goss ended up hitting a double powerbomb on Blake and Murphy. Aiden English hit the swanton off the top and went to cover him. Murphy kicked out of it. So then Alexa Bliss gets on the apron and was all pissed about this. But then Blue Pants pulls her down. She chases Alexa Bliss around. And eventually Alexa Bliss is able to kick her away. She goes to slap Aiden English. But Blue Pants stops her. Attacks Alexa Bliss. Fights her. Murphy tosses out Aiden English. Hits a roll up on Simon Goss. But Simon Goss is able to kick out of it. But then the Vaudevillains hit the Rolling Dervish on Murphy for the win. And they become the new NXT Tag Team Champions. Which was a nice moment. This match I thought was really good. The Vaudevillains had finally won the NXT tag titles. They had been stopped at every turn. This probably would have been better, though, if it was Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy, since, like I said, it was in New York, and that's the storyline that they were building to. And like I said, it's kind of BS that Blake and Murphy got to hold the NXT tag titles, but Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy didn't. So that's just personally what I think. This should have been Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy. But the Vaudevillains still worked. And obviously the aftermath came was Blake and Murphy would lose their rematch clause to the Vaudevillains. The Vaudevillains would go on to lose the NXT Tag Team Championships in, I believe, October, November time-ish. And then they eventually turn heel shortly afterwards. The Vaudevillains then got called up to the main roster, where they pretty much had a lame run on the main roster. They were pushed. They had like one WWE Tag Team Championship opportunity at Extreme Rules, and then they were never featured ever again. They were drafted to SmackDown because of the draft. And then pretty much Simon Gosh was released, and Aiden English now is wrestling as a singles wrestler, where his whole gimmick is that he cries. It's pretty dumb. Blue Pants. So I actually have to look up what happened to Blue Pants. Because I wasn't exactly sure. But I know she's not in the company anymore. And it says... what does it say? It says that she was released on December 2nd, but it doesn't say why she was released. I heard a rumor that she showed up drunk to a wrestling show, and that's why she was released. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing, but she was over, but obviously, she deserved to be fired, because you don't do that. And then Blake and Murphy would pretty much vanish off television. They wouldn't really amount to much. They are not even a tag team anymore, thank God. And Alexa Bliss ended up going on to wrestle by herself in NXT. Then she was called up to the main roster after the brand split, and was drafted to SmackDown. Went on to become the first ever SmackDown. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. She went on to win the SmackDown Women's Championship at Tables, Ladders, and Chairs 2016, or TLC for short. Then eventually, she would lose it at Fastlane, regain it back on an episode of SmackDown, where she would become the first ever two-time SmackDown Women's Champion. And then eventually, she lost it at WrestleMania 33. Then was traded to Raw because of the Superstar shakeup. defeated Bayley at Payback this year to win the Raw Women's Championship, and she's the first and only superstar to hold both the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships. So that's pretty impressive by Alexa Bliss. And you can definitely see Alexa Bliss was still good on the mic on this show, but you can definitely see where she had improvements on the microphone after this show, because she was still good, but now she's like great on the microphone. And like I said, I think Alexa Bliss, the reason why she's not, because sometimes I'll think about why is she becoming like this big star now, but not in NXT. Well, I would say maybe the reason in NXT is because she was never in the right place, and there was always kind of people ahead of her that were getting the pushes, so, like the Baileys, like the Sasha Bankses and stuff. So that's probably why she didn't get as big of a push in NXT as she's getting on the main roster right now. But overall, I thought this NXT Tag Team Championship match was really good. And as I've gone back and watched these, every show's had an NXT Tag Title match, and this is probably the best NXT Tag Team Championship match I've seen. And Blake and Murphy, this is easily the best match that they've had as a team. So that's really damn good. So yeah, really good Tag Team Championship match here. Okay, so we had the next match. It was Apollo Crews versus Ty Dillinger. And this is when Ty Dillinger started doing this whole 10 thing, and he was really starting to get that over. He was still a heel, but people loved the 10 thing. It was starting to get over just like the Yes Chant did. And Apollo Crews came out. He was instantly over. And the match, Apollo Crews tried to do a lot of chain wrestling. They go to fight in the corner. Ty Dillinger flips out of it and does the 10 taunt at him. Apollo Crews does the same thing, and the crowd went nuts when he did the 10 chant, and Apollo Crews and Ty Dillinger was pissed about it. Apollo Crews hits a drop kick on Dillinger. Dillinger throws him out to the ring. Crews lands on the apron. He goes to hit a dive. He goes to hit a springboard move, but then Dillinger hits a drop kick on him, and then Dillinger dominates the matchup for a few minutes. He even had gone for a super kick. The first time Crews caught it, and dropped his foot down, and the second time Dillinger hit the super kick, covers him. Crews kicks out. Then he goes for it again, but Apollo Crews hits an enzuigiri right to the back of the head. Starts hitting his comeback. Hits a flying clothesline, the Gorilla Plus Slam into the moonsault for the win. And, obviously Apollo Crews won his debut match, which made sense, because you want to put him over huge, and they were really hyping him up, so that made sense. And from here, pretty much, Ty Dillinger pretty much continued doing the 10 chant, and he really got over with that. He became a huge babyface, he was like one of the most popular guys in NXT probably at one point. And eventually he was called up to the main roster. And he was in the Royal Rumble match in 2017, and now he's on SmackDown wrestling. So that's pretty huge for Ty Dillinger, because originally he was someone that probably wouldn't have had this much of success, but since the 10 chant caught on, it was awesome. Apollo Crews would go on to wrestle a few more matches at takeovers, and then the night after WrestleMania 32, he was called up to the main roster, which really didn't make a whole lot of sense, because it was probably way too soon to call him up, because he had just gotten down in NXT. He pretty much was drafted to SmackDown because of the draft. Really didn't do too much. Now he was just traded to Raw because of the Superstar shakeup. He's starting to do a little bit of something, but we don't know sure if it's going to be anything. So Apollo Crews is definitely a disappointment about someone that could have been a huge star in NXT, but because he was called up too soon, it didn't happen, and then he's kind of floundering right now. Yeah, and I hope the same thing doesn't happen to Ty Dillinger on SmackDown, but we're going to have to wait and see. But overall, I thought this match was a good, solid match, good showcase for Apollo Crews. Next, William Regal makes an announcement backstage and announces that, that NXT wouldn't be what it is without the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, because he ended up passing away about a month before the show aired. And he says that, what did he say? That we want to honor the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, so we're going to have, starting on the September 2nd show, we're going to have the first ever Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics, and it will end at NXT TakeOver Respect. And, he announces that it's going to be great competition. We hope we can do the American Dream Dusty Rhodes proud. I will talk about that whole Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics in the next episode of this series, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, definitely was still sad to see the American Dream Dusty Rhodes pass away, but I'm glad that they commended him with this Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, and it really started, something huge for the tag team division in NXT. Next match was Baron Corbin versus Samoa Joe. This match I thought was another really good match. Samoa Joe immediately tries to put Baron Corbin in the Corkia clutch, but Baron Corbin's able to escape, and he tries to manipulate Joe by standing outside the ring. Joe gets in his face, the referee has to kind of hold him back and tells him to get in the ring and fight me like a man, which happens. And then Samoa Joe hits a splash and an enziguri, and then a drop kick driving Corbin out of the ring. Then he goes for a suicide dive. Corbin counters with a forearm, and then he hits another right hand right to his face. And Baron Corbin hits a couple of splashes in the corner. But eventually, Samoa Joe is able to fight out of him. Is able to get the upper hand. He hits a roll up on Corbin. Corbin kicks out, turns it into a half Boston Crab, which he turns into a crossface, which then he turns into just really bending Baron Corbin's arm back. And Baron Corbin gets to the ropes. He tries to survive by kind of tossing Joe out of the ring, and then he goes to go after him, but Joe takes him up by the knee. Corbin falls face first in the ring apron. Joe throws him into the barricade, covers him. Corbin kicks out. Then Corbin gets Joe into a heel hook, and Corbin just holds it in there, and Joe's eventually able to get to the ropes. Corbin hits a deep six on Joe. Joe kicks out of that. And then eventually Joe's able to knock down Corbin. They both start trading right hands at each other. Eventually Joe starts to hit palm strikes on him. And then he hits a chop on him. And eventually Joe goes to get him in the Corkia clutch again. Corbin fights out of it. Corbin hits a suplex on him. Joe kicks out of that. And then eventually Corbin hits a big boot on him and a super kick on him. And then Joe hits an enziguri on him. And then eventually Joe was trying to go for another move. Corbin grabs it by the neck and says, "No!" And he hits a double choke bomb on him, which I thought was awesome. But Joe is able to kick out of it. Then he gets him into the Corkia clutch, and Baron Corbin ends up passing out. And Samoa Joe pulls out the victory. So this was like, I mean, technically he had lost before to Neville on NXT. But this was like a huge loss for Baron Corbin, and he lost all his momentum. And Samoa Joe wins, which I was fine with because he was still the new signee, and he really needed to build some momentum into Samoa Joe, so I was fine with Samoa Joe winning. And this would go on where Samoa Joe eventually would become the NXT champion in April of 2016, and he would become the first superstar to become a two-time NXT champion. And then eventually he was called up to the main roster, where now he's running roughshod on the main roster on Raw. Baron Corbin would go on to have a few more matches at TakeOver. He was eventually called up to the main roster at WrestleMania 32, where he won the third annual Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. And then eventually he's had some solid feuds and stuff. Then eventually he was drafted to SmackDown because of the draft. He was in the Intercontinental Championship match at WrestleMania 33 kickoff, but he didn't pull out the victory. And now he's in a feud at the moment. So Baron Corbin's doing decently well. He just hasn't had that one big victory yet that's really going to put him on the map, which I hear eventually they do want to do. They want to make him the top heel on SmackDown, which I think would be awesome. And it looks like Samoa Joe is going to be the top heel on Raw. So I would say both superstars have benefited from this match about the same. And yeah, I thought this match was just a really damn good match. Just two big dudes going at it, and it had a different feel to it than the other matches did. Okay, so then we have the next match. It's an NXT Women's Championship match. NXT Women's Champion Sasha Banks versus Bayley. Before the match starts, Stephanie McMahon, the chief operator, no, I forget exactly her title name at the moment. I'm just kind of flustered watching this match. The principal owner of WWE, there you go. She comes out and talks about how people are subscribing right now to the WWE Network because of NXT and because they want to watch the show. She mentions that NXT is starting to really grow as a brand. And she mentions that we've gone from being with 400 people at Full Sail University to now, I have the number right here, 15,589 fans here in the Barclays Center, which is a huge accomplishment for NXT. And then she talks about, how when she said on Raw a few weeks ago that she wanted to see a Divas Revolution, and she said that started right here in NXT because, like my husband Triple H said earlier today, that we don't just put our women out there like they are the main event; they are the main event. So she introduces the co-main event of the show, which, by the way, that's not the co-main event because the main event of the show is usually the last match on the show. So. Yeah, but that's just me being a smartass right there. But I thought Stephanie McMahon was pretty damn good here. And then we had this match itself. It was Sasha Banks, Bayley, NXT Women's Championship. This match was incredible. This match is my favorite match of 2015. I did an award show on this channel, which you can go back. Well, you can click up here to watch it. Where I voted this, I believe, the match of the year. Because it's that damn good. NXT built this story so well. You had the perfect challenger for this title, the Ultimate Underdog Bayley, and you had the perfect opponent for Bayley, one of her biggest rivals, Sasha Banks. So this made sense. And you have the start off of the match. Bayley and Sasha Banks start to lock up with each other. Sasha Banks gets in Bayley's face and just is laughing at her, but Bayley hits a bunch of right hands on her. Bayley hits a clothesline on her, and she really starts to take Sasha Banks to school in the beginning of this matchup. She hits a drop kick to the back of an elbow drop to the back of the head, and then an elbow, just a regular elbow drop while she's on the floor. She gets in the trio roll position and hits a draping elbow drop. And this causes Sasha Banks to have to take a breather, but then eventually Bayley doesn't want to wait, so she drop kicks her through the bottom turnbuckle while she's outside the ring. Throws her in the ring, goes to go off the top rope, but Sasha Banks takes out Bayley's knee, and she's just going to let Bayley get counted out. But Bayley's able to make it back before the 10 count. And Sasha Banks dominates Bayley for a little bit, and she tries to go for the double knees. She tried to go for it earlier, but Bayley was able to fight out of it. But then she ends up hitting the double knees while Bayley's on the top rope turnbuckle, which was awesome. Right to the gut, too. And she covers her. Bayley's able to kick out. So then Sasha Banks started trash-talking Bayley, saying that, you think you're as good as me, Bayley? You think these people care about you? And she slaps her right in the face, and Bayley starts to fire away. She drop toe holds her and just hits a bunch of right hands right to the side of the face of Sasha Banks. She attacks Sasha Banks. She tries to attack her, but Sasha Banks ends up pulling her arm, and she had like an injured hand coming into this match. So she starts to work over the injured head. She had it in the cash. She exposes the injured head of Bayley. She slams it against the steel steps. She stomps on the injured hand, and she puts it in the steps and just kicks it while it's in the steel steps. And Sasha Banks mocks Bayley throughout this match by doing Bayley's pose. And then eventually she hits a flip dive over the top rope right onto Bayley, covers her. Bayley kicks out, and then eventually she tries to take out Bayley's arm. She goes off the top rope, but Bayley pushes her off, causing Sasha Banks to fall off. And you question whether or not Sasha Banks is going to be able to get back in the ring and break the 10 count, and she does so. And then Bayley and Sasha Banks start trading right hands on each other, and Bayley starts to hit a comeback. But she gets cut off again by Sasha Banks, and Sasha Banks gets her in the bank statement, and you think Bayley's going to tap out. Sasha Banks starts to stomp at the injured hand of Bayley, but eventually Bayley gets to the ropes, but Sasha bounces her leg off the rope so she can continue to put her in this move. But Bayley reverses it into her own bank statement, so I guess you could call it the Bayley statement. And Sasha Banks is able to get to the ropes, and then Bayley grabs Sasha Banks by the leg, pulls her in, and Sasha Banks is holding onto the ropes. She lands on her feet. Bayley hits a Bayley to belly on her, covers her. Sasha Banks kicks out yet again. She goes to hit a Hurricane off the top rope, but Sasha Banks holds on to the ropes, and she hits a double knees right off the top rope, right to Bayley's face. Covers her. Bayley kicks out again, and then Sasha Banks goes for a superplex, but Bayley's able to fight out of it. Hits a reverse Frankensteiner on Sasha Banks, and then hits the Bayley to belly for the win. And Bayley finally wins the NXT Championship. She's celebrating. And afterwards, Charlotte and Becky Lynch get in the win. and a hugging Bayley, and Sasha Banks hugs Bayley, and emotional, showing respect, and all of them stand up in the ring holding up the four symbol, resembling that they were known as the Four Horsewomen, and this would be Charlotte and Becky Lynch's last appearance at NXT, and yeah, and obviously, this match was just great in storyline wise because they did a lot of storyline things like having Sasha Banks talk down at Bayley, having her work on the injured hand. They finally finished telling that story of Bayley chasing for that NXT Women's Championship, and she finally won the NXT Women's Championship here. I thought that was awesome, and yeah, it really worked. And obviously, you had to have Bayley win the title because of that story, but also Sasha Banks was wrestling on Raw and SmackDown full time. So, it made sense for Sasha Banks to drop the title to Bayley here and finally put the title on Bayley. And obviously, the aftermath came as at NXT TakeOver Respect, Bayley and Sasha Banks would compete in the first ever Iron Woman match where Bayley retained the championship there. Bayley would go on to have a solid NXT women's title reign. Sasha Banks did her thing on the main roster. Stole the show at WrestleMania 32 to crown the first ever women's champion. Then she disappeared. The night after the brand split, she ended up winning the women's championship. In fact, her and Bayley ended up teaming up in a tag team match the night before at Battleground, which was ironic. And then, Sasha Banks won the women's championship. Then she dropped it to Charlotte at SummerSlam. And then Bayley was called up to the main roster the next night because she had lost her NXT Women's Championship at NXT TakeOver Dallas. Then Bayley would get called up to the main roster. Her, Charlotte, and Sasha Banks wrestled a Clash of Champions for the Raw Women's Championship because she wrestled under the Raw brand because of the brand split. And then where Bayley did not win, then eventually Sasha Banks would go on to start making history. She competed in the first main event of Raw since Lita in 2005 on an episode of Raw where she won the Raw Women's Championship again. And then she lost it at Hell in a Cell to Charlotte, who then became known as Charlotte Flair. Then Sasha Banks would go on to compete in the first ever Women's Falls Count Anywhere match, where Sasha Banks would once again win the Raw Women's Championship. And then Sasha Banks competed in the first main roster, but second ever Women's Iron Man match at Roadblock End of the Line, where Sasha Banks would go on to lose the title to Charlotte Flair in the 30-minute Women's Iron Man match. And then at the Royal Rumble, Bayley started to feud with Charlotte Flair for the Raw Women's Championship. She lost the match at the Royal Rumble. Then eventually on an episode of Raw, she defeated Charlotte Flair to become win her first Raw Women's Championship. Then she went on to defend it against Charlotte at Fastlane. And then at WrestleMania 33, Nia Jax, Charlotte Flair, Bayley, and Sasha Banks all competed in a Fatal 4-Way match for the Raw Women's Championship where Bayley pulled out victorious. And then eventually Bayley, like I said earlier in this video, went on to lose the Raw Women's title at Payback to Alexa Bliss. And they'll obviously are trying to tease a feud because Sasha Banks and Bayley are best friends on the Raw roster, and they're trying to tease some sort of feud. But I really want Sasha Banks to turn into this heel Sasha Banks again because this heel Sasha Banks is just awesome, and this face Sasha Banks sucks, the one that's trying to be Bayley's best friend. And I know they're saving that match, I think, for SummerSlam. But that match needs to happen soon. And obviously, I expect Bayley to, at some point, win the Raw Women's Championship so that match can happen. So I really hope that's what happens. But overall, this match was fantastic. Great storytelling. Great moment at the end where you have Bayley win the title and all the members of the Four Horsewomen hold up the four. And I believe this was the last time that all members of the Four Horsewomen were in the ring together. Because, like I said, Becky Lynch got called, Charlotte and Sasha Banks were all called up. And by the time Bayley got to the main roster, the brand split had already happened. And Becky Lynch was on SmackDown. And now Charlotte and Becky Lynch are on SmackDown. So it doesn't really work out that way. So, yeah, definitely a fantastic. I would totally recommend this match if you want to watch like the emotion and the story behind it. And like I said, I wasn't a Bayley fan at this time, but watching this match here made me a Bayley fan. So, Yeah, definitely a fantastic matchup. Okay, so then we had the main event. It was a ladder match for the NXT Championship. NXT Champion Finn Balor versus Kevin Owens. Um, this match I thought was really, really good. It was another awesome main event. Started off a little bit slow because I think it was crowd a little bit dead after that amazing NXT Women's Championship match. So I think that's why the crowd was a little bit dead. And Kevin Owens has gone on saying that this match was a tough act to follow after that amazing NXT Women's Championship match, which makes sense. Um, so let me talk about this match. So Finn Balor makes his grand entrance. He comes out as the demon, but you see him on the one side of the ramp, then he goes onto the other side with the lights. This is the first time he had the red lights. It was the second time that he had like the demon voices with him. I had forgot to mention it the first time, and that entrance is just awesome every time I see it. I can't wait. I really can't wait to see him to come back out as the demon at some point. Um, and The match starts off. Finn Balor and Owens kind of chain wrestle each other. Owens pushes Balor at first, and then tries to immediately go after the go get a ladder for the title. But Balor stops him. He hits a drop kick on Owens, and he dominates the matchup. Then Owens takes control, hits a cannonball in the corner, goes to grab the title. Balor grabs him by the leg, and then eventually Finn Balor hits a sling blade on Owens, but Owens ends up rolling out of the ring to escape, and he goes to grab a ladder. Balor brawls with them on the stage, grabs a ladder, but Owens gets the upper hand, rams the ladder into the ribs of Balor. He rams it on the top side, then on like the bottom side where you would set it up, and then eventually he acts like he's gonna do like this big spot where he's gonna do like a cannonball or something with the ladder right between him and the apron, but instead he just hits a right hand as mind games, which I thought was awesome. And then he goes to climb the ladder, but he sees Balor's getting to his feet, so he goes and fights with Balor some more. Him and Balor brawl. He goes to throw Balor into the barricade. Balor blocked it with his foot, and him and Balor clotheslines him over the barricade into the fans, and they brawl into the crowd for a while. And then Owen throws Balor into the barricade. He tries to hit a powerbomb on him, but Balor hits a backdrop on him. But Balor tries to attack him, but Owens throws him head first onto the barricade. He throws him over the announcer's table. He grabs the top of the announcer's table and just throws it at Finn Balor. And then he grabs a ladder from under the ring, and Balor ends up going off the announcer's table and hits a drop kick while Owens has the ladder. But the problem is that the ladder ended up landing on Finn Balor's leg, which I don't know if was supposed to happen or not. And then Finn Balor hits a plancha over the top rope on Owens. And he goes to grab the title, but Owens tips the ladder over. So Balor continues to fight with them. And Kevin Owens then eventually hits throws Balor back first. Because Balor goes for the dropkick, Owens throws him back first into the ladder. He hits a slam into the ladder. He hits a senton while he's on the ladder. And he dominates the matchup. Then he goes for the cannonball. Balor moves out of the way. Balor hits the dropkick into the turnbuckle, and then he hits the coup de grace on Owens, and he goes to climb the ladder to grab the championship, but Owens stops him, and he hits a powerbomb off the ladder, which was awesome. And he goes to grab the title, but Balor tips the ladder over, and Owens' back of the head just hits the turnbuckle. I thought that looked pretty brutal. Another spot that I forgot about is when Finn Balor hit the like a suplex, setting Owens' ribs first, like right into the ladder, which caused the runs to get broken, which I thought was a good spot. Then eventually, Finn Balor goes off on Owens some more. He hits a kick from the apron, and then because Owens had tried to go for the pump-up powerbomb, but then eventually Balor goes for the coup de grace off the apron, but Owens counters into a powerbomb into the apron. Then he goes to grab, which is a move that's taken out all the top stars. Then he goes to grab climb the ladder and grab the title, but Finn Balor stops him. Well, he sees, and Owens, he tips the ladder over, but Owens ends up hitting a super kick on him, and then Owens wants him to stay down. He's destroying Finn Balor, but Balor refuses to stay down. He hits another super kick on him, and then he goes to hit a suplex off the ladder, and he sets up a ladder, right between the ropes and the ladder itself, and Balor counters it. and he pushes Owens off, and he lands back first on the ladder. Well, on the ladder, and then he tries to get the title, but the ladder's not positioned right, so he can get it. So he realizes he needs to kind of call an audible, so he hits the coup de grace off the ladder onto Kevin Owens, and then he climbs up on the ladder, grabs the title, and retains his NXT Championship. I thought this match was great. I like that the match was a little bit of a wrestling match, but also had some extreme spots in it, like the powerbomb into the ladder. The pushing when Owens tipped off the ladder, and the cannonball missing it into the ladder. It had some extreme stuff in it, but it was also the wrestling match. It had the story where Kevin Owens was trying to destroy Finn Balor to get his title back, so I liked that. And the aftermath came as this would end up being Kevin Owens' last match in NXT, because then he was already called up to the main roster, but he would just stay on the main roster. He wouldn't have any more matches in NXT, and he would go on to become a 2-time Intercontinental Champion. He would eventually he was drafted to Raw after the brand split, and he would win the WWE Universal Championship, and he's now the longest reigning WWE Universal Champion in history. And then eventually he went on to become a 2-time and current United States champion, and because of the Superstars shakeup, he ended up getting drafted to SmackDown, and now he's known as the face of America. So Kevin Owens has done very well for himself on the main roster. There could be things that are done better with him, but he's done pretty well for himself. He's wrestled all the top stars. And Finn Balor would go on to become the longest reigning NXT champion in history. He would defend the title and become the face of NXT. He ended up retaining it against Samoa Joe, Apollo Crews at one point. Him and Samoa Joe went on to actually win the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics. And then eventually he ended up losing the NXT Championship at a live event to Samoa Joe. He lost the rematch to him at NXT TakeOver the End in the first ever steel cage match. Then eventually he was called up to the main roster because of the draft and drafted to Raw. He was like the 3rd pick, I think, for Raw. I forget exactly. And he went on to become the first ever WWE Universal Champion, but then he had to give it up due to an injury, which allowed Kevin Owens to actually win the championship. And he ended up returning the night after WrestleMania in a tag match that involved Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe. And then eventually, I thought they were going to do something with the feud where Owens with Balor were going to feud for the U.S. title. But now that Owens is on SmackDown, Balor's on Raw, that can't happen, which I'm kind of pissed about, because I wanted to see Balor and Owens feud, because there's natural story there. But now Finn Balor's just kind of doing his thing on Raw at the moment. So that's cool for him. But yeah, both superstars benefited from this match, and this match ended up being really damn good. So overall, a great main event. Okay, so now I'm going to give you my star ratings for each match, and then I'm going to give you what my overall thoughts of the show were, so let me do that now. For the Jushin Thunder Liger Tyler Breeze match, I'm going to give that 3 stars. I thought that was a good opening match. For the NXT Tag Team Championship match, I'm going to give that 3.5 stars. For the Apollo Crews Ty Dillinger match, I'm giving that 2.5 stars. That match was good. Good showcase for both guys, but nothing really too fancy. For the Baron Corbin Samoa Joe match, I'm going to give that match 3.25 stars because it was just 2 big dudes going after it. The match felt different, and the right person went over. For the NXT Women's Championship match, I'm going to give that probably 4.5 stars, because that match was great storytelling, great in-ring action. Right person went over. It was the perfect 2 people to go against each other. And another thing I forgot to mention about that match is Sasha Banks did have a grand entrance where she came out in a car, and she had a bunch of security around her, like she was the boss of a champion, which was awesome. But yeah, that match is 4.5 stars. And then for the NXT Championship match, I'm going to give that 4 stars, because that match was great. Just wasn't as good as the NXT Women's Championship match, because so let me repeat them. So for the Jushin Thunder Liger Tyler Breeze match, 3 stars. NXT Tag Team Championship match, 3.5. Apollo Crews Ty Dillinger, 2.5. Samoa Joe Baron Corbin, 3.25. NXT Women's Championship match, 4.5 stars, and then the NXT Championship match was 4 stars. Overall, I thought this show was great. everything about this show was awesome. I can't really think of a problem with this show. Um, this is probably my favorite takeover ever, or NXT special, because it's just a great show. Has great action, has great storytelling. This show felt like a big deal. This actually felt like you were watching like a main roster pay per view. You would actually think that by the way it was set up. And it was awesome there. And NXT after this continued to grow. Triple H had announced earlier in the show that NXT ended up going overseas to the United Kingdom from December 10th to like December 16th. And NXT was just really starting to grow as a brand. They ended up having another NXT Brooklyn 2 the next year that I'm going to cover later on in the series, and they're going to have a third NXT Brooklyn. NXT now is like one of the big shows that you look forward to for the Big Four. Now that's included in the travel package. It's included in the WrestleMania weekend, the Royal Rumble weekend, and even the Survivor Series weekend. So that's pretty damn. That's a pretty damn huge deal. So yeah, NXT became was starting to become like a huge brand. It really grew after this show. Like I said, it sold out. I think they said this show sold out within like 20 minutes or something. Like I said, it had 15,589 people. This actually ended up being the best show of that 3-day. There was SummerSlam and then Raw right afterwards, and NXT was the best one. That was the one everybody was talking about. They weren't talking about SummerSlam as much. They weren't really talking about Raw as much. It was NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. And the crowd was good all night too. So overall, if I had to rate the show, I'm going to rate it at 9.5. I can't really think. I don't want to give it a perfect show because there's no such thing as a perfect show. There's probably some problems with it. But it's definitely a great NXT takeover. It's phenomenal. My only problem is maybe, like I said, this is a gripe that it was the Vaudevillains that had won the NXT tag titles instead of Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy. That was kind of like, that would be maybe my only gripe. And maybe that you could have given Tyler Breeze the victory. So it's like, nitpicky stuff, but overall, this is a phenomenal show. I would totally recommend you watch it if you want to like pick a takeover to watch. I would totally have you watch this one. But that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to subscribe to my other channels, Owen the Talkinator and CM Brothers. And that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.